Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I think that you should be able to hear me now. My name is David Robertshaw. I'm the academic lead for health and social care at the University of Derby Online Learning. My background is I'm a registered nurse. Predominantly worked in acute care, and I guess my experience with dementia is working in hospitals. So I am the lead academic for Bridging the Dementia Divide, which is the course that you've been studying over the last week or so. We've got another 5 weeks to go as well. And this is the first of a series of 6 webinars, which are an opportunity for you as learners in the course to be able to engage with me as the educator and also the working on the course. And so, like I said, there'll be every single week at 3:30 in the afternoon via Google Hangout. You can also view it via YouTube. And what we'll do really over the next sort of 30 minutes is we'll just sum up the last week. We'll look at some of the key points. We'll hear some of your student stories, and also hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions that some of you have posted below in the discussion area on the discussion page. So let's get started. Just to cover some of the key points really of this week. So we've heard from lots of different people, but what we've kind of probably found is that dementia is actually a really complex life-changing condition which affects a really great number of people. If you remember, we heard from Carol Stanley, who was used to be a registered nurse who's now had to care for members of her family, and actually her voice was her story was incredibly powerful. The challenges that she'd had to face and the things that she'd had to deal with as a carer, and indeed actually as she's aging now, that's one of the dementia is one of the concerns that she has for the future. So I think it was really important that we heard her voice with respect to dementia, and actually was a very powerful one. So we've learnt that dementia is a massive term actually, and it's not just one specific thing, but it's an umbrella term for around 60 different types of neurological disorders, everything from Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, all sorts of different conditions. And all we've covered this week is sort of the first few of those, really, just to get you started and having some sort of basic understanding of what dementia is and what it isn't, and what the sort of about some of the myths and stereotypes, the anatomy and physiology, that kind of thing. So dementia is a massive global issue, and we'll be touching base on that again in a later week during the course. But the World Health Organization, as in a report, said there's about just over 7.7 million new cases per year of dementia, and actually that doesn't sound like a lot when you think about when we've got 6 billion people, 7 billion people now live on the planet, and that's going to be 8 billion pretty soon. But actually, it's a number which is growing considerably and doubling every 20 years. So by 2030, we'll have just over 65 million and about 115 million by 2050. So these numbers are really massive. And it's not just the number of people who have dementia, but also the effects. So if you think every one of those people may have 3 or 4 family members that they see regularly, and therefore the effects of dementia quadruples, in numbers. We know that people who have dementia are expensive to care for and look after and require additional services, and so there's a significant economic burden associated with dementia, and a social one and a cultural one. And we're going to come back to that and revisit that throughout the rest of the course. But I read something today which said that in a few years' time, 1 in 4 people in the UK will have dementia. And obviously I'm from the UK, so that's just a UK statistic, but that's a really high number. And the reason for that really is not just improved diagnosis, increased diagnosis, but also that people are living longer. So babies born this autumn, for instance, are very, very likely, almost 100% likely to live to 100 years of age. And actually, that means that we are going to have a much higher number of people who have dementia. So we've got these 60 different types, but we know that Alzheimer's disease is probably the most common, which affects 60 to 80% of cases. And we've learned a little bit about the basics of what Alzheimer's is, and we know that we now know that abnormal plaques form, and we get nerve cell damage and cell death. And actually, it's not a normal part of aging, which is a really important thing to say. And some of you have been commenting on that this week, and that's been really great to see some of you acknowledging that, really, that lots of people have always thought that dementia is just part of getting old and it's just something that happens to us, but actually that's really far from the truth. So we've covered kind of probably two types of dementia within all of it. We've learned that some types of dementia we can't really do a great deal, and ultimately we can't cure dementia, and that's that's the fact, really. We can give people drugs and try to ameliorate and support some of the symptoms and the issues associated with it, but at the end of the day we can't cure dementia. And if you remember, we watched a video of Nora, who was an old lady whose husband had died some years previously, and unfortunately couldn't remember it, and that was a really powerful video. And actually her daughter Lisa has written a book all about her experiences, and so but that's not an uncommon tale. It's a very common thing, really. But there is a positive side, I guess, and that we know that some types of dementia that we can do things about it. So we saw the video of Mike, who has Parkinson's disease, having deep brain stimulation, which is wires into the center of the brain, which improved his Parkinson's disease. And actually, we can give some treatments for some types of dementia and improve symptoms. So it's not all bad news, I guess. And the important thing to remember that hopefully you'll find throughout this course is that not everybody is dying with dementia. Most people actually are out there living in the wider world with their families. They're doing normal day-to-day things. They're doing their shopping. They're going to the theatre. They're living normal lives. And unfortunately, the media kind of portrays an image that everybody is dying, and it's a terrible thing. But that's not really the truth. So I'm hoping that throughout this course that you as learners in the course will start to see that and some aspects of that. So I just thought, a bit like a radio station, really, I thought I would share some of your comments that you posted on discussion boards and things that I thought were really interesting, and that people had stories that people had shared with the group, and I noticed there's been a lot of posts from people, for instance, in Australia, who said that they work in the outback and they work in really remote places, and it's a big issue, and they have to drive 1,000 kilometers, for instance, to get to the nearest settlement, and and that the challenges clearly are very different there compared to somewhere like the UK, for instance. What we haven't really heard of is people in other countries like China. China is having a massive issue with dementia, and the number of people living with dementia is increasing considerably. But I'll come back to that, and we'll talk about that just at the end of this short webinar. So just to share a couple, really. One was from Deborah, who is an occupational therapist, and she was saying that she is often asked to do baseline functional assessments. So she can look at sort of the way people are now and the things that they can do, and repeatedly do those and see if that they can improve, they have improved, or they've got worse, and just see if they can do anything like that. And she also was saying that she gets involved with supporting teams of carers who can help people to maintain normal routines and to keep people familiar in their familiar environment. And actually, I chose this because the role of the occupational therapist is incredibly important, but often undersold. And occupational therapists can really help people to live normal lives. And I've seen them in lots of different roles, from working with people who have had trauma, have experienced trauma and orthopedic issues with bones, broken bones, even through to spinal injuries, where people can sit up, for instance, but need to move from one side to the other side, and just that simple movement can help somebody regain some function. Now, in the case of dementia, it's all about living a normal life. So an occupational therapist might work with somebody to for instance, keep cooking at home, or keep or providing them with a different type of kettle that means that they can still live their lives. So the occupational therapy role is incredibly important. Another story that I thought I would share with you, really, was that from Richard, and Richard's mother had vascular dementia, and he said that though he wasn't a primary carer, both him and the rest of his family found it quite difficult to respond to his mother, who actually lived in a residential home. There was a really considerable emotional impact of that. But on the positive side, he was saying that his mother retained a glass half full view of the world, which is a really great thing. And actually, sometimes in the end stages, the later stages of dementia, people can lose their location in reality, and have old memories that come, and they lose other things and other memories. And actually, if somebody has a glass half full approach, and has always had that, then that's a wonderful thing to see. As somebody perhaps may not have the wider awareness of the world, but it's a really nice thing to say. And I think I think it's really important to mention here that some medications can help improve that. And I'm not really sure whether Richard's mother had any medication, but that may have stabilized or helped to improve it. So that's a really important thing. The last story that I'm going to share with you really is that from Val, who I believe is in the UK. And Val was saying that her experience of Alzheimer's disease was when her stepfather was diagnosed, and she looked after him for about 5 years and really quite struggled to cope, really, and eventually find a care home. And soon after that, unfortunately, her mum also was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then her mum came to live with her. But the positive side of this really is that Val became involved with a memory club, and I think it sounds like she started to do that as an activity to do with her mother, but she ended up taking an organising role. And memory clubs, I believe, are a bit like memory clinics, those kinds of things, and help people to remember things from previous times and to remember things that are going on now. And you can do wellness activities and compassionate activities. And actually, the message, the message I chose, the reason I chose this, and the central message to this, is that the role of the community is incredibly important for people with dementia and their families, and actually that people go out there and organise by themselves and do things independently. The NHS and healthcare systems around the world can only do so much, unfortunately, and social care. We've seen today in the UK that about social care caps, for instance, for funding. And actually, it's really great to see the third sector, so that is charities and voluntary, and the private sector as well, out there doing things to help people in their communities. So really great work that Val is doing there. So thank you very much to those people who shared their stories, and to everybody else who's been sharing their stories. And actually, the activities this week have really been around sharing stories and sharing what's been going on in your lives in relation to dementia. So I'm really glad, and I know the team here are really glad that you shared that. So thank you very much. So the next things I thought I would just talk about is a couple of people mentioned in the posts below this video about dementia villages, and somebody posted a video about Hogeveen, which is in the Netherlands, and so I just thought I would talk about that because it's a really great example of a totally different approach to the one that we've always had, and it's a fantastic thing. So for those of you that don't know about Hogeveen was a care home in the Netherlands, and actually it used to be a very traditional care home. It used to have sort of a 6-story building with wards. All the doors were locked. There were very crowded day rooms. The TV was on all day long, and lots of medication was used. And actually, we know that medication is a really bad thing. If we give people antipsychotics, for instance, it's a really bad thing. It can make things worse. And the staff that worked there had a bereavement, and a couple of members of staff had bereavements, and at that time they said, "Oh, well, I'm glad they've died because I wouldn't want them to come to a home like this." And actually, that was an impetus for them to change their home and to change the organisation, to change the place, to make it somewhere that people would want to be in older age. So what they did was in 2010, they basically built a completely self-contained model village, a bit like a Center Parcs, if anybody's heard of that, sort of like a holiday village, but a village really. So on a 4-acre site just outside a village, and the whole complex has sort of wide boulevards, little side streets, squares, sheltered courtyards, gardens, ponds, reeds. Lots of, and they basically built 2-story brick houses. But they also built a cafe, they built a restaurant, they built a theatre, a hairdressing salon, and all sorts of, a supermarket, for instance, all these different things. And what these allow people to do is really just live their normal life. So they have about 150 residents. I believe it's 152, and they call them residents, not patients, and that's a really important identification thing. That often we call people in healthcare, we call people patients or service users, that kind of terminology, and actually they're not patients. They're living. That is their permanent home. They are a resident there, so they've adopted the philosophy of residents. The average age of people there is 83, so they're not really old, but they're old enough, and if you can be old enough, I guess. But they all have dementia. So all the residents have dementia, and they have about 250 full and part-time staff who work to support them. So that's a really important number because there's a really high ratio there of staff to residents. In a traditional care home, it might be something like 1:8, 1:10, or even a lower ratio than that. So it's really great to see a high staff to resident ratio. And so I said that they built 2-story brick houses. Well, they live 6 or 7 people in a house. So what they do is they have, rather than having sort of different stages or periods of time, so the 1930s, 40s, 50s, for instance, they have houses built in particular styles to suit particular types of people who may have lived in different classes, for instance. So one of the houses, for instance, is built in a very Baroque way and has lots of fancy ornate furniture. And their philosophy for that house was that often the people that lived there would actually have had servants even, and lived in a very high upper class existence and would be used to that. So it's about the familiarity of their environment. They also have a house which is for people who perhaps have been plumbers or had manual occupations, and it's kind of got quite an arts and craftsy feel, so that people can engage in activities and keep their familiarity and keep doing the things that they would do normally. So talking of doing the things that they do normally, they have about 25 clubs, which are everything from singing, baking, linting, cycling, all sorts of different things. And the entire emphasis is that they want to encourage normal day-to-day activities. So residents are encouraged to do gardening, shopping, for instance, those kinds of things. So what we're saying really is it's a really great place to live, and actually it's interesting because in China, which we mentioned a short time ago, in China there is a recognition of the aging population, and enormous cities are being built for people to live in as the population expands, and they're building large cities where people can live, and actually certain zones, even at the planning stage and the design stage, are being sectioned off for older people to live who have additional care needs. And these places have wider pavements, larger roads, improved access, space for care providers, in addition to the people who live there. So it's very interesting that that's now become much more ingrained in design principles. We've yet to really see this in the UK, and it would be really great to see some care homes in this country sort of start to think about doing this kind of thing. So the downside to all this really is the expense. As some of you may know, care homes are expensive to pay for. They can be in the order of £800 or £900, even £1,000 a week. So it's quite expensive, and for a resident in the Netherlands to live there, it costs about €5,000 per month, which is a considerable amount of money, but it comes out of a public health insurance scheme, which is actually run by the government. So the people who live there pay a very, very small amount, a small portion of that €5,000, which makes it affordable and realistic. The actual complex itself cost €19.3 million, so it was very expensive to actually create and build this environment. But the Dutch state, the Netherlands state, actually funded just under 18 million of that, €17.8 million. So that really is a sign that the Netherlands government is committed to running schemes like this, and recognizing that people are getting older and need that kind of level of support. So, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, and see if we have further instances of this that appear elsewhere, perhaps around the world. So that was the dementia village in Hogeveen in the Netherlands. I'm just going to quickly talk to you about Sir Terry Pratchett. Somebody else mentioned that. I think it was Stephen Hargraves who mentioned about Sir Terry Pratchett. Just because I'm not sure whether some of you may not be aware of Terry Pratchett. So Terry Pratchett was an author who wrote the Discworld series of novels, and he wrote about 70 books, I think, in about 30 or 40 years, and he had 70 million sales. So a really popular, well-loved author. And at the 2008 Alzheimer's Society conference, he announced that he had dementia, Alzheimer's disease. It had been thought that he actually had a stroke, but in the year previously, but actually it came out that he had Alzheimer's disease. And he died age 66, which actually is very young, really, and he probably had a lot more to contribute to his body of work. You know, he was still writing books up until his death. But his announcement at that conference really had a massive public awareness of dementia and of Alzheimer's disease. And he issued sort of a call to arms for society to talk about dementia and start taking steps towards looking at what we could do to defeat it, really. So his discussion of Alzheimer's disease led to a massive financial benefit for research. People suddenly became much more interested in dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and so Terry Pratchett actually funded some research fellowships from 2010 onwards, and are still going on as well. So. And unfortunately, he died quite recently, really. But before he died, he made a series of programs about what it was like to live with dementia, and so his having Alzheimer's disease really brought that to the public eye, and so he did a really great deal of good work on that, and other people are now taking up that mantle and carrying on with it. So that kind of concludes our discussion of this last week that we've been talking about, sort of an introduction to dementia. Let's look ahead to the next week then, and I appreciate some of you may have already started looking to the next week and started to engage with some of the activities, and that's really, really great. But we're in the next week we're looking at communication and compassion and how these are important, and we chose these really because they are part of the 6 C's, which were created by Jane Cummings, who's the Chief Nursing Officer for England. And the 6 C's really came out of the poor care that was observed in mid Staffordshire in the Midlands in the UK, and about staff that were disinterested and leadership that weren't doing their job, and basically a very high number of patients died, and it was because of some very basic things that people could have done to have made their lives better. So we've chosen to sort of focus on communication and compassion. And we'll hear from Alison Kilduff. Alison is a lecturer here at the university. She's also a dementia champion, and she runs Dementia Friends sessions for the Alzheimer's Society. And she'll be looking at what compassion is. We're going to discuss some of the models and principles of compassion and compassion-focused therapy as well, which it was developed by Professor Paul Gilbert, who actually also works in Derby and is a professor at the University of Derby as well. We'll have a little bit of a discussion about the role of education and compassion. I can see that some of you have already started to engage with that, and that's really good. We'll hear from David Foreman as well, who, like me, used to work in acute care, but now works for the university as a lecturer in pre-registration nursing here at the University of Derby. And that's what we're doing next week, really. The final thing to say is we'll be doing the same thing again at 3:30 UK time next Friday, and I'll be joined by a chap called Yasu Katera, who is my equivalent but for counselling and psychotherapy. So he's the academic lead for counselling and psychotherapy, but he's really interested in neuro-linguistic programming and CBT, so which is cognitive behavioural therapy. So as we're talking about compassion, we're going to be talking about cognitive behavioural therapy and compassion-focused therapy as well next week. So Yasu will be joining me here in the purple box next week. So last things to say really is don't forget to get your badge for this week. All you need to do is read the pages in the week, take part in the discussion forum, even if it's just one post, and then complete the final quiz. For more information on that, you can have a look at the Unit 1 introduction page where you can get some more information on that as well. So so the last word from me really is to keep engaging in the discussion board. It's really great to see some of you in there. You've had some really interesting posts, and I look forward to seeing you in there. Look out for next Thursday. This page will become live again, and you can pose some questions. It'd be really great to have some questions that we can answer between Yasser and myself as a conversation. But if not, obviously you can post them or send us your messages, post them in any discussion board, and we'll keep an eye out for them. So that really concludes what I was going to say today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the course.